This morning, so we're at the border of the land of milk and honey. But before we get there, we're going to talk a little bit about where we left them off, the Israelites and Moses and Aaron and the people, where we left them. Then we're going to talk about a few different instances, things that happened in between that point of last week's sermon and today's message of the giants, the grapes, and the grasshoppers. And then we're going to talk about the giants, the grapes, and the grasshoppers. Last week, we left off, and Moses was standing before the people, and they were complaining that they didn't have any water for the second time. Now, mind you, they were just a few weeks out from this hurrah from Egypt. They were let free. Pharaoh kicked them out. The people gratefully gave them all the plunder and sent them on their way. That's kind of where we left them. They've been grumbling a little bit along the way. We've heard about the manna. We've heard about the quails. We heard about the water twice. And there they are, grumbling with Moses as he strikes the rock and God provides water. That was a few weeks to a month in. They end up traveling to this place, and I can't remember exactly where it is. It's down below Mount Sinai, what we recognize as Mount Sinai, and they're camped. And they stay there for about a year before they move on to go in to the land of milk and honey. And there's a few things that happen. In general, what happens is they make camp. We hear about them going up and down the mountain, especially Moses and Aaron, as they go up and talk to God and come back down. There's a lot of conversation going on, and they hear about making the tent that God will live in and all the instructions about the tent. They hear about how the priests are to worship and serve the tent, how the people are to worship. They get a lot of instructions from God. Now, when we imagine it, we imagine Moses going up and down the mountain, maybe Aaron, maybe Moses' assistant Joshua going up and down. But what struck me this time around is that the 70 Israelite leaders also went up and down the mountain a few times. On one of those trips up the mountain, they were talking with God, like Moses did. God was talking to the people at that point in time. And God gives them some rules. Now, if you remember watching about the 10 Commandments, right, back to that, Moses goes up and gets 2 tablets. Right? At some point, they break, and he has to go back up and get 2 more tablets to replace them. But what I had forgotten is that God actually gives those commandments 3 times. The first time, the commandments are spoken to the people through the leaders of the Hebrews. God invites them up there to have a seat and then tells them the commandments before Moses goes up and gets them marked in the tablets. The Israelites, leaders, then at another point are invited by God to go up. These are a couple of our ahas, and this is why I'm going over them. They go up the mountain because God invited them to dinner. Kind of embellishing a little bit, but they were eating and drinking in front of God while they're having a conversation with God. Having dinner right there, talking to the creator of the universe. So it is not like Moses was being usurping all the power of the Hebrews. This was a community of people going up and talking to the creator of the universe, a relationship between the whole community and God. And God was inviting them to come up and down the mountain. So back to those tablets. The tablets Moses goes up and gets the first set, and then he comes down. Does anybody remember what happens when he comes down the first time? He doesn't accidentally drop them like, what's that movie? Well, there's the Ten Commandments, and then there's a spoof that was done on the Ten Commandments. I forget. What is it? No. We'll think of it here in a minute. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks does one where he goes, the 15, 10 Commandments. Right? There's a scene in that movie. But do you know why? So Moses actually throws them on the ground and shatters them. Does anyone know why? Do you remember why? He finds out, while he's gone up the hill talking to God, getting the commandments in the holy place, the people on the ground are getting restless, complaining again. Why are we out here? Moses has abandoned us. I'm thinking these words. Well, we're here by ourselves. Aaron, Moses' brother, decides to take up an offering of gold. And they make this golden calf. And so when Moses comes down and he sees that they have made this golden calf, he is just like angry beyond belief. And he takes these, he just can't help himself. And he throws them on the ground and he breaks them. So he has to go back and get a second set. Now that golden calf, I want to talk about that for a minute. Because that golden calf just popped out of the fire. If you read the text, Moses confronts his brother Aaron and the people, and Aaron is like, well, the people were us, and we just took the gold and threw it in the fire, and out came the golden calf. It just happened. We didn't do anything. God also is not happy about this. So Moses takes the golden calf, pounds it into, has them pound it into, I don't know if he did it, pounds it into gold powder, has them mix it into some water, and he makes them drink the gold. Now, what purpose that meant, I don't know. I didn't do a theological deep dive on this, but I just thought that's kind of interesting. I didn't remember that. And then God sends the message through Moses to the people to send out some leaders in the congregation to go out and kill by the sword a brother, a father, a son. 3,000 died by the sword, according to the text, because they did not trust God. I hadn't remembered that either. But this is not the only time that God comes down, according to the writers, and wipes out part of the community. There's a fire at some point that starts to consume the outside of their camp, and Moses has to bid for mercy. So in these conversations of him going up and down the mountain, he's begging God for mercy for the people, and reminding God that if God wipes the people out, what is Pharaoh going to think about their God? What is the Egyptian community going to think about the Hebrew God? That God all of a sudden becomes very small and insignificant. Because, the people got out, but their God couldn't save them. So there's this conversation with God and Moses and God and the people going on this whole time that they're camped there. And they're camped there about a year. When it's time to go, they send the spies into the land. While the spies are spying, the people, what are they doing? They've been doing it for a year. They're complaining. We don't have any meat. So spies are spying out the land, and the people are complaining again about meat. So they go up the mountain and talk to God, and God says, you know what? I'm going to give you what you asked for. I'm going to give you a lot of meat. I'm going to give you so much meat that you are going to be tired of meat. And God does give them meat. And then it says, God then smote them. I like that word. We're back to smoting again. Struck them down while the meat was still in their teeth. What is that? Sounds like an old proverb. Be careful what you ask for. I don't know. You might just get it. So they're complaining and still having this ongoing conversation with God and setting up their camp and doing the things that they do. And the spies are out there spying for 40 days, and then they do come back, right? They come back, and as I was talking with young folks up here, they come back with lots of evidence. They came back with pomegranates. They came back with figs. They came back with grapes. I'm sure they had plenty of bounty when they came back and not just one clump of grapes. And they're excited. It's kind of like, think about the Exodus from Egypt. Yeah, this is great. This is going to be a great thing. Look at all the bounty that we've got. Look at all the gold and the wheat and the stuff that we got from the Egyptians as we left Egypt. Look at all the grapes and the figs and the stuff we got from this land of milk and honey. It's so awesome. And it lasts, last time it lasted 3 days. This time it lasts about 2 sentences. Right? Lasts about 2 sentences, and the people start talking themselves out of the good gift that God is ready to hand over to them. Because their fears start working on them, like the mirror down here. The thing didn't get any bigger. It was their perception of what the thing was to them. Their fear started to grow and grow and grow within a minute or two. And I have personally found myself in those situations. Like the roller coaster thing where I'm going to go do the thing and I'm like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe I probably shouldn't do that. Well, I'm old in my neck and probably not a good idea. I talk myself out of moving forward to something that is just a joy, could be a joyful experience, at very least a new, interesting thing to go do or explore or to read. I need to dip my toe in a little and keep moving forward because Caleb and Joshua, who were 2 of the ones that went over, are standing there going, come on, guys. We were over there. We saw. We have the God of the universe at our back. We know that God has promised this thing, and we have been called to go into the land and to live and prosper in the land. And they try, we heard it, they try a couple times to get the people to go, but then there's some grumblers in the background. They're like, well, I don't know, maybe, come on guys, let's back off a little bit. Let's back up a little bit. But they were really big. Do you remember? You saw them guys? They were they were big. They were fish story. They were this big. How big does your fish get? You know, each time you tell the story, right? It was this big. Well, you don't have a picture, so it's a little harder these days with cameras on all of our phones to tell those stories. And I can imagine, you know, if they'd have had the camera, they're taking pictures, someone would have went up. Nope. This is what we saw, right? But only Joshua and Caleb. And so God says, I'm not going to take my promise away from you. The promise is that for generations, your generations, for all of your families, you will have this land of milk and honey. I have promised it to you, and I will be good for my promise, with one caveat. None of you who are alive today over the age of 20 will ever enter into the promised land because you did not trust in God. And so for 40 days of spying, God says for 40 years, time served, so they get the 1.5 years off, right? 38.5 more years. For 40 years, they are going to wander around until every last person who grumbled about it are gone. Anyone 19 and under, they get to go in. Joshua and Caleb, they get to go in because they stood up for what they knew was a truth when everyone else took the step back. They get to go in. Not even Moses gets to go in. Which we'll hear about a little bit later down the road here. So what I was talking with the two young people here about God's being with us, God didn't take away the grumbling from the people. God didn't take away the fact that there were probably some things that the Hebrews had to address once they got into the land, because there was already people there. God didn't take away the fear. God didn't take away the call. God didn't take away the work. But what God did is remind them that I am the God of promises. I am the God that will be with you always. And I am bigger, way bigger, than any fear that you will ever have. I don't know, I just gave myself goosebumps. Because I often forget that very thing. So know for you today that the God of the universe, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, the God of Ruth, the God of Miriam and Moses and Aaron, Joshua and Caleb, is the same God that has granted us a promise for a future. God will not ever abandon us in that promise. And that is the hope that I hope for you this day, and that you can go out into the world and share that with others. Amen.